And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, October 22nd. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to click that super chat button to create a super chat of any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. I will acknowledge it, and it just makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to recap both games on Monday Night Football, Ravens and the Buccaneers, and the Cardinals and the Chargers. So we'll get into those games. The Ravens winning 41-31 over the Buccaneers. And then in the game that was an ESPN Plus exclusive, the Cardinals picked up a win on a last-second field goal, 17-15 over the Chargers, which I was a little surprised about. Thought the Chargers, I had the Chargers winning, but of course, in the NFL, you just never know, especially this year. So let's get into it, shall we? So we'll start off with the Ravens and the Buccaneers game. So got off to a fast start for the Bucs. They were up by 10. They were winning 10-0. And you felt good. The offense was moving the ball. Baker Mayfield connected with Mike Evans for a touchdown. They kicked a field goal, but you knew the Ravens were going to get it going, and that's exactly what ended up happening. Their offense has been playing really well. And Lamar Jackson, I mean, that was an MVP performance last night, really was. But the Buccaneers, though, we'll get into it, but not only was this a loss, but it was also a loss when it comes to injuries as well. So, the Bucs, they went 8 plays, 70 yards down the field, and Baker Mayfield connected with Mike Evans for a touchdown. Mike Evans was banged up coming into this game. 25-yard touchdown, and so that made it 7-0. The Ravens then punted. The Bucs, they sacked Lamar Jackson on back-to-back plays. Then they went 11 plays, 75 yards down the field, 6 minutes of time possession, and they ended up kicking a field goal. Now, actually, what ended up happening was Mike Evans aggravated his hamstring injury, and he was ruled out immediately. Went to the locker room, and they were down their top wide receiver. So, and then that kind of changed the momentum of the game, because then the Ravens really started to get it going. Lamar Jackson connected with Mark Andrews, who had a big game for a touchdown to make it 10-7. Then Baker Mayfield threw a pick. Ravens turned that into a touchdown. That was set up by a 59-yard reception by Rashad Bateman, who also had a good game. And then Lamar Jackson. So there was a penalty. So Lamar Jackson scored a rushing touchdown, but there was a holding, and Troy Aikman didn't really like the call, so they got pushed back. But then on the very next play, Lamar Jackson connected with Justice Hill for an 18-yard touchdown, so that made it 14-10. Baker threw another pick, and that led to a Justin Tucker field goal of 28 yards. And then, we went into the half, and the Bucs, the Ravens were up 17-10. Then to start off the second half, Ravens came out. Justin Tucker kicked another field goal, 52-yarder, so that made it 20-10. The Bucs did get into field goal range, but Chase McLaughlin missed a 55-yard field goal. And then the Ravens, they turned that into a touchdown. Lamar Jackson connected with Rashad Bateman for a 49-yard touchdown. The Bucs punted. Derrick Henry, an 81-yard run. It was interesting how he really wasn't being used at certain points during the game, but then he took over, in the second half. Had a receiving touchdown later on. So, that led to another Mark Andrews touchdown. Then the Ravens fumbled. The Bucs turned that into a touchdown. Baker connected with Rachaad White, so that made it 34-18. Then the Ravens, they answered with a touchdown. Lamar Jackson connected with Derrick Henry for a 13-yard touchdown. Bucks scored another touchdown. Bucky Irving from 1 yard out. They actually recovered the onside kick. Turned that into a touchdown. Baker connected with Rachaad White. Ravens punted. And then towards the end of the game, Chris Godwin for 21 yards, but he ends up getting hurt. Dislocated his ankle, so it looks like he is out for the rest of the season. And Todd Bowles, he's been hearing it for that. Because, I mean, the Bucs were going to lose this game, did lose the game. There was really no chance that they were going to come back. And to leave your starters out there and he ends up getting hurt, it's not a good look. It's not a good look. But he, defended it and said, the guys want to be out there. But it's just not a good look. And Chris Godwin was having an unbelievable season, and now he's out for the year. Mike Evans, we'll see how long he's out for, but the Bucs are now down their top 2 wide receivers. And looking at the stats of the game, Lamar Jackson, 17-22, 281 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. The Ravens ran the ball for 244 yards, the number 1 rushing team coming in. Derrick Henry, 169 yards on the ground, a receiving touchdown. Lamar Jackson had 52 yards on the ground. Rashad Bateman, 4 receptions for 121 yards and a touchdown. He's been looking good at times during the year. And the Ravens did give him a new contract, and, last night played really well. Justice Hill, 3 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown. Mark Andrews, 4 for 41 and 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry, like I said, receiving touchdown. Ravens defense had 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble. Justin Tucker went 2 for 2 on field goals, 5 for 5 on extra points. And then for the Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield, 370 yards passing, 31 for 45, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Bucs ran the ball for 125 yards. Bucky Irving had a rushing touchdown. The leading rusher was Rachaad White. Cade Otton, he was getting banged around last night, but he was their leading receiver, 8 receptions for 100 yards. Rachaad White, 6 for 71 and 2 touchdowns. Chris Godwin, 7 for 65. Mike Evans, 1 for 25 and a touchdown. Bucky Irving, 3 for 54. Bucs defense, only the 2 sacks in the beginning of the game, and that was it. So they dropped to 4-3. They'll be playing the Falcons next week. Big NFC South matchup. The Falcons coming off of that loss against the Seahawks. I can't figure out the Falcons. And for the Buccaneers, I mean, you're down your top 2 wide receivers. I mean, they're going to have to figure it out. Baker Mayfield did not play well last night. I know he threw for a ton of yards, but, once you lost Mike Evans, I mean, the game completely changed. And now you're going to be without Chris Godwin, too. So we'll see. They got Jalen McMillan. They got Trey Palmer, Sterling Shepard. I mean, those guys are going to have to step up. In the running game, I mean, at least you got the 3 running backs. You're going to have to lean on your running game, too. So they got the Falcons, and like I said, Chiefs after that, and then the Niners. So they got tough games coming up on the schedule. They're going to have to win at least one of them. And if you lose to the Chiefs and the Niners, you beat the Falcons, you go 5-5, I mean, you're in good shape. I mean, by no means does this mean the Bucs are done. But they are definitely in trouble. And for the Ravens, they just continue to roll. They're 5-2 now on top of the AFC North, and they will be taking on the Browns next week. So they look really good. We'll see what happens next week. I'll be seeing them in person. So let's get to the other game, shall we? Now, this was a lot different. Really didn't get a chance to watch it just because I didn't have access to ESPN Plus, believe it or not. So I actually was listening to the Cardinals radio broadcast at certain points during the night. But it got off to an interesting start because Kyler Murray threw a pick, and then James Conner ended up forcing the fumble on Tart, who picked it off, and then it ended up being recovered by Michael Wilson. So the Cardinals got it back, but they ended up punting. Then Justin Herbert throws a bomb to Jalen Reagor for 41 yards, and the ball gets knocked out, and it goes through the back of the end zone, and that ends up being a touchback. So Chargers don't get any points. Then the Cardinals punted, and then Cameron Dicker, who had a great game, kicked a 59-yarder, so that put the Chargers on the board. They were up 3-0. Cardinals then went 10 plays, 79 yards down the field, And Kyler connected with Greg Dortch for a 5-yard touchdown, so that made it 7-3 Cardinals. More punts, and it was 7-6 at the half. Dicker kicked a 50-yard field goal. Then to open up the third quarter, Chargers punted, Cardinals turned it over on downs. Then Dicker kicked yet another field goal, a 28-yarder. All field goals for the Chargers in this game. And then Kyler Murray, a 44-yard touchdown run, so that put the Cardinals up 14-9. Interesting decision by Harbaugh in the fourth quarter. So it was 4th and 3, and he elects to go for the field goal rather than going for it and trying to get 7 on the drive. They ended up taking the lead later on, but I don't know. I feel like they should have went for it, but they didn't. Dicker kicked another field goal that made it 14-12. Cardinals punted, and then Dicker kicked another field goal to make it 15-14. Cardinals get the ball back. Kyler avoided a sack. He was able to hit James Conner for 33 yards. Then Conner, another 5-yard gain, another 6-yard gain. And then they were saying on the broadcast, on the Cardinals radio broadcast, like maybe, James Conner, they'll let him score and then they'll get the ball back. But Cardinals did not give the Chargers an opportunity to possess the ball. Kyler ended up kneeling it down, and then Ryland kicked a game-winning 32-yard field goal. And the Cardinals improved to 3-4 on the season. Justin Herbert had a good game, 27-39, 349 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. J.K. Dobbins only 40 yards on the ground. Will Dissly was their leading receiver. He had 8 receptions for 81 yards. Joshua Palmer had a couple of nice catches, 4 receptions for 63 yards. Led McConkey, 546. A couple of fumbles in the game. Like I said, for the Chargers. No sacks for the Chargers in this game. Kyler Murray went 14 of 26, 145 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. James Conner had a good game, 19 carries for 101 yards. Kyler, the 44-yard touchdown. He had 64 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown, of course. They ran the ball for almost 200 yards, and this is against a good Chargers run defense, and they had their way against them. Trey McBride was the leading receiver, 5 receptions for 51 yards. Conner had 2 for 51. Cardinals defense, 3 sacks in the game. They improved to 3-4. Chargers dropped to 3-3, and we'll get to the NFC West later in the show, but yeah, it's close. The division is close. So, that's where that is the recap there. 17-15, Cardinals pick up the win, Chargers the loss. Let me know what you guys think, though, about these games. What were your takeaways from them? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Jets-Steelers game from Sunday night. We'll talk about Russell Wilson's performance. We'll talk about the Jets as they continue to struggle. So make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.